Through the Eyes of Another Pony by CardsLafter, Unrevised Equestria Daily Version. Chapter 2, Revenge of the Chapter. So upon waking up some undetermined amount of time later, I found myself laying back on the library bench — I guess ponies don't have chairs — that I had been on before, only slightly more bruised. I worked my jaw to confirm that my cheekbone had indeed been a trooper, and took the fall for what seemed like the entirety of my body, simply because it's selfless like that. At the time, though, I wished it had been a little more self-preserving and spread the gravitational love around. What I had wished upon even more was that I had been caught instead of being allowed to dash myself against the hardwood floor like a rag doll. To be fair, my state of unconsciousness did arrive rather quickly and without warning, but if Rainbow Dash can break the light spectrum and the sound barrier at the same time, she can at least help a pony down gently. I digress. This was reflected upon later, because in all actuality I had been overcome with that sensation of disorientation. You know that awful sensation where you spend the night in an unfamiliar setting and you wake up thinking that how that isn't your backyard and that you don't remember planting those trees? Well, I got that multiplied many times over as I realized this library I was in was particularly cartoony and musty. Then in 10 seconds flat it all came back to me in a rush that made me once again doubt my claim to sane. After fast-forwarding through the, what I presume to be normal, stages of confusion, shock, horror, awe, and happy, I slid off the bench and called out, "Hello?" No answer to my surprise. Twilight was trusting enough to leave me in her house alone. I guess ponies didn't have other pony thieves? Just Gilda, perhaps? Regardless, I sighed softly and decided I needed a cigarette. As I trotted outside, I pulled out a Marlboro and smirked as it just lit itself. Magic. It wasn't going to be hard getting used to this. Not even kinda. I took a long inhale as I began taking in the scenery, letting the calming sensation of nicotine set in. One of the few things I do not hate about the damn things. As my eyes wandered about, everything was so bright and colorful, with an extra dose of pinks thrown into it all. Now, I'm a manly kind of guy that can get away with looking all right in a pink shirt, but still, it was starting to make me wonder if these ponies ever got tired of seeing such colors. I mean, just how much pink does one need in their life? Now, I'm not sure if thinking of pink caused it, or perhaps some force-wall power of hers may have triggered the event, or if she was just Pony Superman, and always knew when she was needed. What I do know was that my already incredibly pink world became cramped, full of even more pink in but an instant. With a gasp not unlike that of a vacuum cleaner turning on, a pony of the colors of pink and pink zipped right up to my face. "You must be new!" She looked so ecstatic and curious and pink that I didn't even have time to let it sink in that Pinkie Pie was in my face's personal space. "What is that?" She pointed at my cigarette with a dramatically extended hoof, which didn't seem possible since she was only inches away from me to begin with. It was only just then that I realized that the other ponies were just a tad shorter than me. I figured I must be Big Mac-sized or something. I responded in what I hoped wasn't a stupid way. "Have you seen the big crater in town? It's huge! You have, haven't you?" She inquired, not taking a single breath during her intense interrogation. "Are you Twilight's cold friend?" I said profoundly. "Wait!" she yelled suddenly, hopping back and crouching down defensively. I was waiting. I didn't know what else to do. I was still too busy reeling from the pink sensory overload I was experiencing to do anything else, really. It was as though something obvious had just come over her, though, and everything else needed to stop. Then she get that look. Yeah, the one she gave Applejack. Narrow blue eyes rest in pink suspicion. I think I had some sort of psychoactive properties, because even though I didn't have anything to feel guilty or anxious about, I began to sweat and panic. I got brave. Yes? "Is it true that you don't have a name?" she asked slowly, her narrow eyes focusing intently on me. Not really," I answered honestly. I wasn't as brave as Applejack. I was not going to lie to her eyes that were staring into my soul's inner child. Let the silly pony take that risk. "Oh!" She became extremely put out by this for some reason. I felt even worse. I wasn't even doing anything wrong, and I'm still not sure why I was feeling so bad to begin with. Pinkie Pie must emit an aura of empathic emotion that inflicts you with what response she deems appropriate, I figured. Then I realized I was trying to analyze the Pincus Piecus before promptly just letting it go. That was one of the wisest decisions I've ever made in my entire life. What? I asked, my undeserved guilt offset only by my copious amount of perplexity. "Twilight told me you didn't have a name, and that you and her were trying to come up with one, and I wanted to help and give you a name, but you already have one, and now I can't help name you, because you already have a name, which means there's no point trying to give you one," she explained at rapid speeds before letting out a sigh. "You know the one? When she thought her friends didn't like her anymore? Receiving it first person, Pony, was horrible. Heartbreaking was only beginning to scratch the surface of just how much an effect it was having on me." That's still true," I pointed out, trying to smile in an encouraging fashion. "I do still need a pony name." It was like I had fired a concentrated dose of happy right into her bloodstream, which I believe is illegal back home, or so one would have thought due to the excited reaction she displayed, which involved a bounce, squeal, hoof clap, and something else that I'm pretty sure defied even the extremely lenient equestrian physics. No, I don't know what it's called. All that mattered to me at the time, though, was that I not be held responsible for another Pinkamena breakdown. Crisis averted, guilt trip evaded. "What's your special talent?" she asked instantly, ready to bequeath me with moniker right on the spot. "Fire?" I said, with a helpless laugh, pointing at the cigarette in my mouth. Strangely enough, she did not seem put off by the terrible odor. I was caught fearing she might actually like it and ask for one. I wouldn't have given it to her easily, but if her eyes got big and round enough, I'm pretty sure she could have made Hideki Tojo call his planes back from bombing Pearl Harbor. "Really?" The idea of a fire pony was unbelievably exciting to her, it seemed. I've no idea what she wanted to do with a fire pony such as myself, but I could tell the gears had already begun to turn in her head. Sweet Celestia, what had I done? "Pinky, we agreed to name him later!" I heard my idol shout from the distance. We both turned to spot Rainbow Dash lazily doing loops in the direction of the town square. "Now come on! Twilight said to get him and bring him back, not interrogate him." Why on earth, or Equestria, they didn't send some pony with more focus than Pinkie Pie, such as Applejack, Rarity, or maybe a small rock, to get me, I'm not sure, but apparently she had taken long enough that Rainbow Dash was also sent. That suited me just fine. I didn't pass out this time, fortunately, and was simply overcome with the warm, inspirational fuzzies instead. This must be what Rainbow Dash was afflicted with when she met the Wonderbolts. Stoic quickly interrupted my happiness, bringing me back to Earth, Equestria, and telling me to stay focused. I sighed wistfully before turning back to Pinkie Pie. "Names later. There's a party at the crater," I joked sarcastically, half expecting her to actually believe it. "A big one!" she agreed with a laugh, tilting her head back and forth with every other syllable. "We were going to name it after you, but blah! You ruined by not having a name. Now we have to call it No Name Party." The fact that she caught on to the slightly subtle joke was more cool than I could reasonably take time to explain. Suffice it to say, Pinkie Pie was awesome. "Come on!" Rainbow Dash was suddenly behind us, somehow pushing us both along with her head. "Move it, No Name!" Laughing, I began to break out into a gallop, and got about halfway through my cigarette before I could smell the odor of ash and fading smoke in the air. As we turned into the town square, I was instantly assaulted by a cornucopia of ponies, and their collars all staring at a large hole in the ground. The scorched earth let off a somewhat acrid smoke that made my eyes water as we got closer. This didn't seem to bother the ponies so much, I noticed, before realizing I was still smoking. With that in mind, I took a final drag of my cigarette before dousing it on my tongue and stashing it away yet again, while every pony was distracted with the crater. I did not want to draw too much attention to myself, and I'm really not a fan of unfamiliar crowds, human or otherwise. Now this crater wasn't like huge by apocalyptic standards, but it was still big enough that it would almost take you 30 seconds to jog a lap around it, so it wasn't exactly minuscule. I was just glad that no pony got hurt, it seemed, and that it was too far away from any building to have done damage. It had just caused a big nasty scar in an otherwise pristine little town. "Where's Twilight?" I asked, since she was the pony that had sent for me. In a display of amazing upper pony strength, Pinkie Pie grabbed me, hoisted me up into the air, and yelled out for Twilight the moment she spotted her and Applejack on the far side of the crater. "Twilight! Here's a fire pony! The one with no name!" Pinkie yelled, shaking me just a tad to help emphasize me. This caused every single pony to look at me. "Thanks, Pinkie. You're a champ." Since I might as well have been walking around with a big red neon sign saying, "I did it and I'm not sorry," I just shrugged and pulled the cigarette back out. Yes, still being waved about in the air. It didn't even faze me by this point that Pinkie was holding me up, despite being significantly smaller than me. Pinkie Pie also can outrun Rainbow Dash, break out into a lyrical masterpiece for any reason, and knocks on barn doors with her face. There was really no point in contemplating it. Twilight face-huffed. I was betting that she was thinking along the same lines as I was, namely fearing that suspicion would instantly be aimed at me. Sure enough, I was already getting glares and hearing whispers. I saw Daisy restraining herself from having a Valley Girl connipon, and spotted Berry Punch, who was quick to snatch up Ruby before backing away. Overprotective parent pony to the unnecessary rescue. Taking her lead, the rest of the ponies began to put some distance between themselves and me. I was quickly becoming singled out and secluded except for Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash, whom had protectively placed herself between us and the other ponies. It was like the Sakura treatment on crack. I hate to say it, but I was really not appreciating the reception, and many ponies were quickly becoming less endearing to me as the whispers got louder and more brazen. "Y'all ponies, knock it off!" Applejack's commanding voice instantly nibbled it all in the bud, causing all ponies to turn to her in Twilight. "That's no way to treat a guest in Ponyville. I declare he ain't even here had a chance to introduce himself, and y'all gonna start pointing hoofs at him? For shame, I tell ya!" Applejack is not a silly pony and would never be so again in my eyes. With just a handful of sentences, she had changed the entire herd's mood from suspicious contempt to apologetic shame. I smiled somewhat genuinely touched at the fact that she had come to my protection, and gave her an appreciative nod as both her and Twilight approached. "Nice going, AJ," Rainbow Dash said with a laugh. "And here I thought I was going to have to get meat on some ponies." "Sure you were, Rainbow," Twilight said with a mirthful roll of her eyes. "So anyway, stranger, you Pinkie?" "Yes," she answered with a bounce, causing me to nearly drop my smoke. "Yup, still up there." "Be a dear and drop our new friend," Twilight politely ordered. Why Twilight chose the word drop instead of taking the extra syllables to say set him down instead, I'll never know. Pinkie did exactly what she was told, though. I smacked into the ground betwixt all the ponies hard enough to bounce a little, and instantly became somewhat less enamored with both the purple and pink ponies. At least I had matching face bruises, I told myself with an internal gouache. "Pinkie, you—" Twilight face-hoofed again, before groaning in exasperation. "No, that's actually my fault. I should have seen that coming. I apologize." "It's cool. I've had worse," I promised as I got up with a wince, glancing at the crater in question. "So, yeah, I don't remember doing that, but to be honest, I just woke up here some hours ago, so anything is possible. I may have fell out of the sky for all I know." "Oh, thanks for that back there, Applejack. You too, Rainbow Dash." Sure thing." They both gave me surprised looks. Using fan knowledge was not winning me any points, I figured. I would have to stop that. Ha! Yeah, right. I was enjoying the hell out of it. "Anyway," Twilight interjected before either of them could ask how I knew their names, "the important part is that either way, you don't think you did this, right?" "Nah, not intentionally, at least." I shook my head politely, blowing my smoke away from all the ponies. "I only just found out how to breathe fire earlier today." "Yeah, it smells terrible." Applejack threw a hoof over her nose, staring irritably at my cigarette. "Sorry." I blushed and doused it on my tongue, though I won't lie, it was purely for the reaction I got from every pony, except Twilight, who still gave a slight grimace. They could have asked if I was a wizard, and it wouldn't have been as funny as the looks on their faces. "Gosh, I didn't mean you need to hurt yourself." Applejack gawked at me like I was a crazy, doesn't everybody, as I put it away, yet again in the nothing. "Apparently fire doesn't harm him," Twilight incorrectly speculated, apparently having not believed me when I said I knew how to do that without hurting myself. The thought had not really occurred to me, though, about being immune to fire. I began to wonder how the fire got ignited from within, or if it did so just outside of my mouth, like I could tell without a mirror. Then I remembered what dependable catch-call for the implications of both answers. Magic. Whatever pony was the creator of physics here, he or she was sure lazy. "That's kinda intense." Rainbow Dash's eyes widened at the thought, making me feel more awesome than was healthy for my ego. "We're getting off the matter at hoof here." Applejack yanked us both back on track pointedly. "Right," I concurred with a smirk. "Well, Twilight, do you know of any natural phenomena that would cause this sort of thing in Equestria?" "Not really," Twilight said, furrowing her brow inquisitively. "Why, do you?" "Well, I've got a few theories that I'd rather not list off without some evidence," I said, showing a helpless smile. "I mean, I just don't want to worry anyone. Pony, I was rudely interrupted in the middle of my correction as a sinister laugh and a lot of pony gasping. We all turned back to the crater as the unpleasant chortling magnified in volume, and out of the epicenter the normal seemingly smoke began to turn dark violet and swirl about. It coalesced into a somewhat pony-shaped cloud of what came off to me as pure evil. Not exactly easy to literate upon, but there you have it. Evil-feeling smoke pony. "Returned, have you, human?" The voice boomed, somehow causing the sky to darken as storm clouds surged forth and blocked out the midday sun. It was a deep, feminine voice filled with malice and self-importance. Typical villain voice, really. The crowd began to back off slowly at first, before sprinting away like a stampede. Applejack and Rainbow Dash weren't at all intimidated by the display of power, but Twilight did seem a bit apprehensive, intelligent enough to stay cautious. Pinkie simply turned her head upside down with one hell of a confused expression. She later informed me she was trying to look at the cloud a different way to see what else it looked like. Made sense. Clouds, shapes, yeah. I, however, wasn't too bothered by this because I was in Equestria, and the only thing dead I saw in Equestria was a couple of fish that Fluttershy had once served some ferrets. She's quite the killer. I hadn't seen anyone, pony, get seriously injured in my days as a brony, or even somewhat injured. Hence, while I wasn't going to fling myself in the way of danger, I wasn't exactly shaking in my hooves. Yeah, I guess. I was just here a few hours ago, so technically, yeah, I'm back, I replied, arching an eyebrow as I tried to resist the urge to smirk. I'm such a smartass. You think to mock me? It shrieked dramatically. Laughter wanted me to laugh at the absurdity of such a question, but Stoic was there, reminding me that I didn't want to piss off supernatural forces without knowing the extent of their capabilities. Yet. Not really, I just don't get what's going on here, I answered truthfully, performing the classic pony shrug, which takes a lot of effort, actually. Are we being invaded? Silence! It bellowed loud enough that even I was somewhat startled. The skies began to ominously thunder as the evil cloud pony floated towards us menacingly. Now, I'm not one for violence, but this situation was screaming that evil, villainous, heinous, awful deeds were about to take place. And that was no bueno, what with being surrounded by most of my favorite equines. That's far enough, Smokey, I warned, doing that pony snort that ponies do, which caused a bit of fire to flare from my nostrils. Had I been any less serious about the situation, I might have freaked out at about how cool it really was. It's very cool. But I didn't. I held my poker face and began to glare at the cloud. Do not presume to threaten me, beast! I shrieked, before suddenly charging us, becoming formless as it did so. Not one to wait for the first punch to be thrown, I simply breathed fire at it. I'm fairly certain that didn't do a damn thing, because it wasn't until a huge shaft of light pierced through the clouded skies that the formless wonder actually stopped. Inside of the beam, what looked like a big white comet began to plummet down towards us all, causing the beam of illumination to shine even more brightly. No! The sinister weather anomaly snarled as the light began to push the storm clouds away in all directions. It was actually one of the coolest things I had ever seen at the time, really. Special effects budget had obviously been multiplied to accommodate. You! It snapped, causing me to think it was talking to me. It was kind of formless. I really couldn't tell what it was looking at. Me? I instantly shouted back. There I was, again with the smartassery. It's not all about me, folks. The Cumulus menace zipped forth with a sudden burst of acceleration, and kinda just passed straight through Rainbow Dash, whom had, to her credit, nearly dodged it altogether. It did catch her by the hind legs and tail, though, and began to drag her away. "It's got me!" she exclaimed. Not to say I'm a cynical jerk, but the first thing to go through my mind was, no, really? To avoid the breakdown that losing Rainbow Dash would have caused me, I immediately pounced on her and held on tight with all four legs. Surprise, surprise, it started dragging me away too. I obviously didn't think this through. Then I felt Applejack grab my tail in her mouth, and I looked back to see her dig her hooves in to prevent further abduction while Twilight cast a spell. I don't know where she found one that seemed to be pushing Monster Mist away, or if she just made it up on the spot, but all that did was reinforce that Twilight was OP in my opinion. That's when it had enough and simply grabbed all of us before taking off, though not nearly as quickly as it was going before. Even poor Pinky, who was still turning her head in different ways at the damn thing, I don't know, I guess it was just her square peg to her round hole, got hauled away as well. Whee! She screamed gaily as it soared off with us. I wanted to remind her that this wasn't cool and that she should serious up, but then I felt stupid for even thinking of saying that to Pinky. I mean, I didn't even say it, and I felt as I was just thinking that I was a moron. Now that comet was quickly approaching from the sky still, and that seemed to seriously perturb this great smoky abductor. Unfortunately for it, Purple Cloud Fiend didn't seem to be able to move so fast carrying 5 ponies with it. I can relate. I can't even move carrying 1 pony as a human. Regardless, it tossed Pinky and Twilight away first, before trying to shake me and Applejack off of Rainbow Dash. I don't know why it wanted the multichromatic pony, but one thing was for certain. Corrupted Cloud Creep could go get its own damn idol and leave mine the hell alone. I clung to her as hard as I could before I felt a force trying to pry me off, but I just wasn't having any of that. I heard Applejack say something, her voice muffled by my tail that she was still firmly clamped onto. Turns out ponytails are very strong, and it really doesn't hurt much to have them pulled on, but I will say having a yanking sensation come from above your butt still is the most awkward feeling ever. I rate it right up there past being naked in front of a crowd and getting your bronyism exposed to your long-awaited love interest way before you're ready to tell her. And for the ladies, let me tell you, that last one is hard to handle. I still get the occasional nightmare. "What?" I called out to Applejack, not thinking of the consequences my actions would lead to. "I said, don't you dare let her go!" She instantly responded before getting tossed away as well, her mouth no longer securing herself to my tail. Yeah, even in the midst of everything going on, a certain half of me almost forgot about the seriousness of the situation on our hands/hooves. I was that close to laughing my plot off at poor AJ. "Get off!" Rainbow Dash whispered softly, distracting me from my amusement. My confusion was instantly replaced by anger, as I had deducted that the Fog-O-Doom was trying to possess the fastest pony in all of Equestria in an attempt to escape that ever-nearing comet-like thing, which was starting to get really close, I might add. I agreed that it was the best logical avenue it had, but that didn't mean I was about to just give Dashi up without a struggle. "No!" I yelled, honestly scared now. I didn't know what to do. I simply held on as hard as I could, fighting the force trying to pry me off. Eventually it got smart and decided to try and possess me instead. Today was apparently my day for entirely new sensations, because I can honestly say that I nor likely any other human had ever felt anything like it before. Slowly losing contact with my senses was actually frightening, but at the same time the most smoothing experience one could imagine. It was like going to sleep, only more horrifying, 'cause sleep is such a bracing event, and even traumatizing. That's when I learned about Fire Unicorn trick number 3. Let's review, shall we? Fire Unicorn trick number 1. Light cigarette. Way more handy and cool than it should be. Fire Unicorn trick number 2. Breathe fire. Can be replicated with a lit match and Barcady 151. Fire Unicorn trick number 3. Violently repulse attempts at evil cloud possession on my person/pony with the power of fire. I don't get it either. Quite possibly the most unbelievable obscure spell one could have, yet if I had to choose only one right now, this would be it. Hooves down, yo. Now I've never been rapidly flying through the air, only to lose all inertia and momentum in an instant and fall 4 feet to the ground before, so I can't describe the sensation other than it was way more nauseating than being seasick ever made me. How Rainbow Dash was able to blast off and brake at such speeds, I've yet to determine, but it didn't seem to bother her at all. "Curse you, human! Curse you!" Mist of Malice screamed in that disembodied voice before flying off somehow on fire. Picture that, if you will, a burning purple cloud. Physics. How do they work? "Wah!" Rainbow Dash said with a groan as we got to our feet. "That was wild." "Yeah," I agreed with a wince, spotting a brand new bruise on my flank. "Equestrian gravity. Yea, be cruel, female dog. That did it for me, too." I decided a Marlboro was in order. I had earned it, after all, if you took the time to ask my opinion. As I pulled it out, however, I was suddenly blinded. Knew this would happen one day, I thought to myself. No kidding, my first reaction was actually a helpless cry of shock. Turns out that comet singing was Her Majesty herself, Princess Celestia, moving at super speed, and she was shining like, well, the sun. Specifically right in my face at that particular moment. I heard Rainbow Dash cry out as well, so I can only assume we got to share the opportunity to bask in Her Majesty's ice-searing radiance together. Rainbow Dash, for once, did not make something 20% cooler by being there. If I had paused to reflect upon that, I'm sure it would have blown me away. "Ow!" I replied evenly, still aware enough to take a drag of my Marlboro as I narrowed my eyes until they were practically shut. If staring into the abyss was half this intense, I could see why most people would go mad. I, however, just didn't feel like it applied to me. My day was already chock full of craziness, and it just kept going on in intensity. I also reminded myself I might already be insane, and that seemed to satiate the urge to freak. "You're not one of my little ponies. I've never seen a pony like you before, in fact," she said softly, her regal voice slightly on edge. I did just save Rainbow Dash, so maybe she wouldn't smite me on the spot out of suspicion. That would have sucked if she did. Indeed, it would have ruined my entire day, which, despite everything that had just happened, was still the coolest day in my life by a long shot. "Well, not to be disrespectful, Princess," I said, still cringing from the light, "but your high beams are about to make certain that I never see a pony like me, too. Or anything else for that matter." "No kidding!" Rainbow Dash agreed, covering her eyes with her hoofs. After a moment, Celestia smirked and toned it down a few thousand lumen. After blinking several times to clear things up a bit, I smiled up at my second favorite pony. Yes, that's right. I heard Celestia. Celestia's solar empire all day long. Resistance to Celestia is resistance to ponydom, and I will never fight the pony power. I felt that bubbling sensation of awesome fangirlism start to surge up again, but it lost steam halfway in. Adrenaline was still kinda pumping after all. "Rainbow Dash!" Pinkie cried as she sped up to us all, somehow beating Applejack, who had quite a head start as last I checked. "No Name, are you okay?" "Yeah," Dash replied with a shrug as I took another drag, stepping away from every pony to avoid blowing smoke on them. Courteous as always. "No name?" Celestia asked, smiling at me with that one-eye thing she does with her hair. "Quite an odd name. Not from here, are you?" "What gave me away?" I asked, with an innocent smile that squeaked like Fluttershy's did just before the quiet game. After an immediate double-take, I tried to do it again and failed to replicate the sound. That was going to drive me nuts for a long time. I'll tell you now, despite hours of wasted time trying to pinpoint that sudden sound bit's trigger, I never figured it out. Saying it was frustrating was an understatement of immeasurable proportions. To this day, I hate that damn squeak with the heat of 1,000 Celestias because of that. Twilight and Applejack finally caught up to us. Twilight barely able to breathe. She was so exhausted next to the barely winded farmer pony. To be honest, I really couldn't blame her, as I was a smoker, and that put me about 2 places under bookworms/nerds in terms of respiratory stamina. If you're wondering, asthmatics are the ones in the bundle. "Princess! Thank goodness you're here," Twilight barked in between breaths. Just how far we went, I couldn't tell you, but it must have been a few light years from the way she was carrying on. "Easy there, Sugar Cube," Applejack said with a nervous chuckle. Thank you, Your Highness." "For what, my dear?" Celestia asked with a smirk, tossing me a glance to let me know she knew exactly what she was being thanked for. Not sure why she didn't just come out with it. I guess when you get up there in the millennia, you kinda take whatever amusement you can get, no matter what, which is a philosophy I can get behind, if you ask me. I'd harmlessly troll ponies in my spare time, too. Oh, for saving Rainbow Dash and No Name back here, of course. Applejack was oblivious, which was kinda cute in a way. I was just doing my damnedest to resist the urge to point out her mouth malfunctioning back there. That was your fiery little friend here, No Name as you called him? Celestia clarified, giving her wings a shrug. Seemed the Pegasus had an advantage in shrugging, an unfair one if you asked me. Yeah, well, it wouldn't have tried to run away if you hadn't shown up, I said, kicking at a rock in modesty. Yeah, I'm not good with self-deserved credit. Undeserved credit I can soak up all day, however. Was that thing anyway? Twilight asked, starting to finally catch her breath. That was a nightmare, Celestia answered. I almost expected thunder to crash to help emphasize the revelation, but alas, I was disappointed. The same one that had corrupted Princess Luna. I face-offed. I knew the voice, I'd seen the pilot, and still I did not recognize the damn thing when it was in my face, carrying me around all over blue hell. I let my head and ears droop a bit with the realization that I was a terrible brony. Let's go back to Ponyville, Celestia suggested. I expected her to just use magic as there, but guess what? Celestia ain't no pony's taxi service. So we had to walk our sorry flanks all the way back, except Rainbow Dash, who all but laughed at us the whole way there. Gratitude at its finest. When we finally arrived at the library, most of us took the opportunity to find places to lay down. Poor Twilight looked as though she wasn't going to make it, and even Applejack was starting to look a little run down. I was fine, surprisingly enough, and so was Dashy and Pinky, which wasn't surprising at all. Celestia remained on her hoofs, staying somewhat alert in case a certain purple haze decided to return, I assumed. After having thought about it somewhat, I noticed that Celestia always seemed to be poised to move, no matter what. Her diligence was impressive, actually. I didn't bring attention to it and decided to break the silence myself as we all made our various colored plots comfortable. So, the nightmare, huh? I asked, rubbing the back of my neck with a hoof. I thought Nightmare Moon was just Princess Luna in a bad mood? Hardly, Celestia said with a smirk as she fondly reminisced. Luna in a bad mood consists of adorable sulking, 4 socks, and her favorite comfort food being brought to her room. No, the nightmare is an essence that magnifies negative emotions, indirectly controlling any pony through manipulation and suggestion. What made you think Princess Luna was such a monster, oh nameless one? Being on the spot was awkward. After mentally sorting through a plethora of responses, I settled on a safe one. A brief shrug. They accepted that, luckily enough. It was after Rainbow Dash, Applejack said with a snarl, not appreciating her friends being endangered, to which I can completely relate to. Yeah, I agreed. I think it wanted to use her to escape from you, Princess. Dash is pretty quick after all. Indeed, had I not been worried about the 2 of you, I would have continued the chase, but my concern is for the ponies of Equestria, Celestia declared with a hint of steel determination. That's the kind of Celestia that everyone needs to see. That Trollestia nonsense would vanish in an instant if everyone met this alicorn. I admit I would miss it if it did so. All I know is that it sure didn't like No Name, Pinky said with a laugh, rolling over on her bench with a Cheshire grin. It was all angry, furious pants at him, and he didn't even do anything but breathe his fire stick. Seriously, I agreed with an amused nod, skipping the urge to wonder at just how Pinky knew what pants were. That thing was getting all sorts of bent out of shape over me. It went on like we had already met even. Wait! It knew he was a human, Twilight gasped, pointing at me. Everyone that wasn't me looked confused and proceeded to gawk at me. Such a popular trend this was, as though it were all my fault. I was shaken out of my somewhat deep thought process, having realized that Twilight was right. I had entirely forgotten that it had pointed me out as a human. To be fair, I'm not unused to being thought of as a human today, and certainly wasn't then either. "What's a human?" Rainbow Dash voiced the more obvious question, her eyes looking me over for any great differences between myself and other ponies. I found myself wishing for a cigarette, addicted, remember, before just sighing impatiently. "I am a human." "No, you're a unicorn, silly," Pinkie Pie said with a laugh, bouncing over to me spontaneously and honking my nose. It was like she was purposefully trying to stop me from sinking. Pinkie Pie, destroyer of all things sensible. Celestia approached me, and I looked up at her with a blank stare as Pinkie stepped aside. She then began to let off a shimmering green shine all over before looking down past me. I didn't understand at first, but upon looking following her gaze, I realized that the shadow being cast by me wasn't the correct one. Curiously, I got up off the bench and gazed at Twilight's extraordinary clean floor, spotting not a unicorn shadow, but my own. A human shadow. I checked my ashen hooves to make sure I was still a unicorn, and that nothing had changed, which I'm somewhat ashamed to admit I was relieved nothing had. Twilight, being the observant gal she is, noticed right away and pointed out the mismatching shadow to the others, causing a myriad of shocked related reactions among them. "That's slightly bizarre," I admitted silently, wondering just how scary that looked to all of them. "So, no name," Celestia said, suddenly not so soft and cheerful. "What's a human?" I looked back to see the princess and the other ponies all staring at me like I was from outer space. I ran a hoof down my face in frustration. Really, though, I should have been getting used to that. Wow, every pony. Let me tell you this. The story is okay. It's cool, okay, yeah. But there's one thing I really hate about it. There are some parts that are written that confusedly, for me at least, that I had to record some parts actually like 10 times. There were parts in other stories where I had to record several sentences or events several times, but in here, seriously, sorry. Just to read it okay, because usually when I read on FimFiction, I have the setting for the font on, I don't know, what was it, normal? I can read it okay then, but I had to download this in PDF from Google Docs, because if I try to read it normally by putting just the browser on one side and Audacity on the other, seriously, it's so small I can't read it. So I had to download it as PDF and then, open the PDF, make it full screen and zoom to 150% just to be able to read it without being 5 centimeters away from the screen. Which is kind of frustrating for me because, it's 7:10 p.m. and I started recording this very short chapter in comparison to the revised one. When did I start? 1 p.m.? So 6 hours for a chapter of not even 45 minutes. I think you can relate to how frustrated I am right now. I will do the rest, and I'm seriously not looking forward to chapter 14. I know that this read will be over 4 hours long. And seeing how this is written, I'm really not looking forward to it. Sincerely yours, Visual Pony.